Hello, hello! Welcome back to Loki's Librarian. If you are new here, welcome. I am your librarian, Katrina, and I do a book review a week while I mix up a cocktail while I review it. I call this Feature Books and Booze. I'm trying to figure out what else I want to do so that it's not just books and booze, although, frankly, some weeks that's all I can handle. This week's book was a fun romp through one of Hollywood's legends, Alfred Hitchcock. The book is Hitchcock's Blondes, the Unforgettable Women Behind the Legendary Director's Dark Obsession by Laurence Leamer. The accompanying cocktail is The White Lady, which was apparently one of his favorite cocktails based on context because it only says a quarter and a half. I'm going to say it's probably in ounces. So we'll say it's a quarter ounce of lemon juice, a quarter ounce of Cointreau, and a half ounce of dry gin. Since that makes a shot that's just barely over an ounce, I'm going to go ahead and double that recipe. I'm also going to include egg white. The recipe I found said that egg white gives it kind of this weird white like view. The person who posted the recipe didn't think that Hitchcock would have ever used it because he hated eggs. I don't know about that. That was not included in this book. Doesn't mean it's not true. I'm going to do the egg white because some days I just don't give a fuck if salmonella hits. So let's do this. So first off, this book is not and was not intended, I don't believe, to be a direct biography of Hitchcock himself. There are biographies written about the great man, and he references those extensively, and he certainly gives due credit where it's needed. I mean, he's a credible author. He's not trying to claim any work that's not his, is what I'm saying. But what it is a series of short biographies on the women who starred in his most famous films, and how he came to work with them and why he overwhelmingly chose to work with blondes. So it's part biography on Hitchcock. Mostly it's a review of his greatest works and the women who made them great and how he came to work with them. What I say, I'm doubling this, which means I need a half ounce. I should be using fresh lemon, but some days I just don't have it in me. Today is one of those days. Now, it does start and end with a great man himself. It has to, because Alfred Hitchcock is the backdrop against which these women earned their fame. So, Alfred Hitchcock was born August 13th, 1899. He was born to William Edgar and Emma Jane Hitchcock. He had two older siblings, and the family was Irish Catholic, and they had a disciplinary mindset. They were a middle-class British family, which is not actually as easy as it sounds because they were Irish, and to be Irish in Britain was not an easy thing to be at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. It's still not an easy thing to be. There are problems even today ongoing with the British and Irish. The family was solidly middle class, but apparently Hitchcock's proclivities towards disciplinary and authoritative mothers was definitely born at home. His own mother would make him stand at the end of her bed and recite the day's goings on. And this, as he reached young adulthood, he traveled to Germany during the heyday of the Weimar Republic, which... Let me get this egg white cracked in here while I think about how to describe the heyday of the Weimar Republic, right? So the Weimar Republic, it was absolute hedonism. All right, I have a book I read, not for this channel, I read it like a decade ago, called Voluptuous Panic. I'll pop it up over here if you want to see what the cover looks like. You know, egg white looks nothing so much like freaking snot. I mean, I get why he didn't like egg whites. That's all I'm saying. So it's absolute hedonism. I mean, like, there's a reason that cabaret is set during the Weimar Republic, and cabaret was actually quite tame for what was possible in the Weimar Republic. And like, as I was writing this review, because the connections, you know, one of the reasons I read is it helps me to see connections and patterns in time. And I think that, I mean, I get the panicked, so Voluptuous Panic addresses the atmosphere of the Weimar Republic. And now that I think about it, like, I mean, I get this panic belief of a possible rise of another fascist regime, because it was exactly the sort of loose, completely amoral sexual degeneracy that we see today, with the extreme debauchery and lack of responsibility, that ultimately opened the door for Hitler to walk onto a public stage. I mean, we now have people who are openly advocating for, like, pro-pedophilia. Like, I don't even know where that comes from. Like, who is so morally bankrupt that they could think that that is okay? And that is the sort of mindset that existed 100 years ago in Germany. You could literally buy anything for a price, and the price was relatively cheap because of rampant inflation, which is also a running theme of today's, you know, American democracy. Let me shake this up. Ooh, that is very cold. All right, I'm glad I didn't, like, you know, triple or quadruple the recipe. That was perfect. That worked out perfectly. Yes, doubling it was perfect. So, all right, I'm going to say it's a half ounce of lemon juice, a half ounce of Cointreau, and 1 ounce of dry gin, and egg white if you want this lovely milky white appearance to make a white lady. Anything and everything that you could ever want to see, observe, or experience in the sexual arena was available for quite cheap because of the inflation-driven economy of the Weimar Republic and 1920s Deutschland. And here is where Hitchcock experienced and developed voyeurism. And there does not seem to be any indication that he partook of any of the vices he witnessed beyond just prurient interest in watching. And that need to watch is what would set up and become the driving force behind his creativity over the next, 60 years of his life, like literally. That's a very mild cocktail. That is profoundly mild. It goes down really smooth too. I don't think you need the egg white. I mean, the egg white gives it that, like I said, white milky appearance. That is very, very light and delicate. I appreciate this cocktail. When he went to Germany, I believe he was already engaged to, or possibly, I think he was only engaged to his future and lifetime spouse, Alma, and they would be married from like 25, 26 up until he died in 1980. But it's entirely possible that between that engagement and or early marriage and the Catholicism in which he was raised kind of helped to rein him in from partaking of the excesses. But that background in which he experienced his early, sexual awakenings, if you will, it definitely had an impact. And not least of which is that Germany is kind of the heart of Scandinavia, and this is where he developed his obsession with blondes, and he came to see them as the absolute height of feminine beauty. And this actually becomes tricky, believe it or not, because blonde is actually a recessive mutation. I am well aware that I am a recessive mutant here. I am a natural blonde. This has been my hair color my whole life, except for the few times that I dyed it. And yeah, haven't dyed it in a very long time at this point. That's all I'm going to say. It's a recessive gene. Only about 2% of the world's population are actually natural blondes, and that didn't bother him. He didn't care if they wore wigs, dyed their hair, as long as they were blonde on screen. That's what mattered to him. Although it is telling that most of his, preferred actresses were natural blondes. Now, additionally, he liked his women to be a little seedy, to have some sin that they needed to redeem themselves from in order to give them a strong character arc, which this, incidentally, is not specific to Hitchcock, all right? That is called good storytelling. That's narrative, all right? That's creating a character who is flawed and human and not a quote-unquote Mary Sue. But he was very good at creating these character arches. He'd work with outstanding writers to create this backstory for the women to shine, basically, to really extend their abilities and acting capabilities. I mean, basically the mother-whore dichotomy was strong in his films. A good girl gone bad who redeems herself back to sainthood. And he knew that in order to make this popular, he would have to get women audience members to be on the side of the main character, the main protagonist female character, right? Because he was ahead of his curve there, right? Most people assume that men are where the money is spent, and that's statistically and historically not true. Because statistically and historically, women were in charge of the home's finances, and so women were the ones who would decide where money was spent. And the companies that jumped on board with that marketing mindset blow everyone away, like hands down, from publicly traded corporations, customer service representatives. As soon as they recognize that women are the major spenders, they don't have to be the major breadwinners, but they are the major spenders, their books take off. And Hitchcock was no exception to that, and he was an early adopter to that mindset, and so he knew he needed female audience members to be on the side of the female protagonist. And he was very good at creating that story arch that would draw them in and make them empathize with and see themselves as the main character. As this is something that, yes, I could do, and yes, this is something that I could also do. I could be this bad person, but I could also redeem myself and become the hero at the end of the story. One of the research interviews that Leamer did was with a Dr. Heath King, who is a psychoanalyst, and he taught a course on masterpieces of American film at Yale. And Dr. King believes that Hitchcock had Asperger's syndrome, which is, of course, a high-functioning autism spectrum disorder. And that kind of fits. I mean, obviously I don't know a great deal about Hitchcock personally. I've certainly never met the man. I think I was 3 when he died. But based on interviews given, things told about him, people who knew him personally, I think it's possible, all right? Leamer also includes quotes from Camille Paglia, so he's not just trying to tell a one-sided narrative here, which I appreciate. Like, to the very depths of my soul, I appreciate somebody who looks for all sides of a matter, because of how biased and ripped apart we have become as a nation. You know, everybody digs their feet in and sticks to their side of the story and what they believe, but he's trying to tell a nuanced narrative, which I appreciate to the core of my being. Well done, Mr. Leamer. I salute you. So Camille Paglia, what she had to say is that garden variety misogyny is basically too simplistic for Hitchcock's relationship with these women. Paglia said, quote, "Misogyny is a hopelessly simplistic and reductive term for the passionately conflicted attitude of major male artists towards women." Leamer concludes, quote, "As these actresses made memorable films with Hitchcock, he projected his complicated, tortured attitude toward women onto the screen. He recorded what Paglia calls, quote, the agonized complexity of men's relationship to women, a roiling mass of admiration, longing, neediness, and desperation," end quote. And I think that is part of what makes this film so absolutely timeless, is it captures these absolutely human conditions that cross time. All right, I mean, we're well into the 21st century here. We're 2 decades into the 21st century, and his movies are still considered absolutely timeless and flawless masterpieces of horror and tension. So with that information in mind, let us jump into how he came to work with his stars and how he helped shape and mold them into what he needed for his creative genius to bear fruit. So he looked specifically at, I believe it was 8 stars? Yeah, 8 different stars. So he looks at 8 different stars of Hitchcock's film, and he starts with probably to what most of us is going to be the least well known, which is June Howard Tripp. And she's not as well known on this side of the pond, I don't believe, because the role that she started for Hitchcock was one of the last silent movies that was filmed in England. And Americans tend to be provincial, and unless it's Harry Potter, we ignore movies filmed by anyone not American. So the film in question is The Lodger, and it opens with a body being found on the Thames River embankment. Now, the book The Lodger was based basically on the Jack the Ripper murders, which had ended as inexplicably as they began 40 years prior. Leading lady June Howard Tripp was not a natural blonde, but I actually do think that she is the only Hitchcock lady to not be a blonde. She wore a wig for this production. So in the book is based on, she was the book was she was a brunette, but Hitchcock insisted she be blonde for the film, so she wore a wig for this. And June was a Shakespearean actress, and the only reason she was available for the movie was because she had experienced an emergency appendectomy and was not available for the rigorous schedule of live theater. She maybe should have made herself available for live theater, since filming for Hitchcock, with his drive to get it just right, and he was, and this is why I do think that the Asperger's might be a very accurate. Don't get me wrong. There are directors who are not Asperger's, who are just assholes who do this. Looking at you, Stanley Kubrick. Poor Shelley Long. Like, the stories of Shelley Long and The Shining are infamous for a reason. But what makes the difference here is Shelley Long always, she was pretty clear that this was absolutely abusive and torturous, and she did it because she was signed into a contract. Most of the actresses who worked with Hitchcock came out of it feeling that he had made them better actors for having worked with him. And that is the mark of a true master right there, a true genius. But for Miss June, his need to get it just right ultimately resulted in her rupturing her appendectomy scar, and she was sick for longer. It took her forever to recover from that. Because for one scene, he needed her to carry like a tray up to the lodger, 20 steps. It's not that much, but when you're not supposed to be lifting a lot of weight and you have to do it like 20, 30 times in a row, it resulted in rupturing her scar. Like I said, she had no complaint about this. Like I said, most of the actors who worked with Hitch had no complaint about it, and he insisted they call him Hitch, by the way. Most of them. We'll circle back to that in a very bit. Most of the actresses acknowledged that under his guidance they became better at their craft and were able to deliver precisely what was asked of them, not just with Hitchcock, but with future directors as well. She would go on and work like an extra 20 years before retiring, and she ultimately passed away in 85. So, I'm sorry, 40 years. Yeah, 40 years. She would work 40 more years in the industry. The larger was gratifying to audiences because throughout the whole thing, it looked like the leading hero of the British stage, who was Ivor Novello, they thought he was the murderer because that's how it seemed. All of this done in silent film, so it's got those little cards with the dialogue thrown up in between, right? But it's that created anxiety in its own way, and of course, in the end, he's found to be innocent, which created Hitchcock's first truly commercial success. And the book wraps up with, well, the very last chapter of this book, The Hitchcock's Blondes, includes like a brief blurb on what happened to each of these leading ladies. Howard Tripp, she married John Allen Burns, who was the 4th Baron of Inverclyde, and he was an abusive jackass, apparently. They ultimately divorced in 1933. She married and divorced twice to Edward Hillman Jr., so same guy. They got married, divorced, and I think they married again because they reconciled twice. They were married when Hillman died in 1966. June ultimately passed away January 14, 1985, and she had been retired since like 65, I think. Or maybe it was the 50s, I don't know. The next young actress to captivate Hitchcock was Madeleine Carroll. She would star in his English movie, The 39 Steps, also probably not as well known over here on this side of the pond because not Harry Potter. He slowly starts to push what is socially acceptable at this point in time, because the movie features Carol being handcuffed to her co-star Robert Donat for most of the time she is on screen. And at one point, the couple even spends the night together. And I mean, I don't think that England had the same decency laws that we did, but it was still pushing boundaries to have an unmarried couple spending the night together like that, handcuffed together. There's certainly, I don't think in this 50 Shades world I need to explain the sexual connotations of that, but at one point he has her like roll her stockings off her leg while handcuffed to Donat, and that is highly erotic no matter what decade you're living in. And Carol just took this all in stride. I mean, she never broke under the conditions. I think the closest she came to breaking is there's an anecdote in here about she really needed to use the bathroom one time. And Hitchcock knew that, but because, I don't want to say it's because he's a guy. It's because he was friendly with the cast, it's my personal opinion. He just wanted to, watch her squirm because that's what friends do, right? They torture each other. If you don't do that to your friends, are they really your friends? But her moxie impressed him enough that he cast her again in Secret Agent, which was not as successful because it was more or less just a remake of 39 Steps, right on the heels of the success of 39 Steps. And then World War II happened, and as Hitler moved across Europe, Carol opted to step up and rescue children from France, and she would ultimately broadcast for the United States Information Service after victory in Europe was declared. She did marry several times before retiring to Marabella, Spain in 1965, and she lived there until she died October 2nd, 1987. Hitchcock's preferred leading lady, like the one to whom all others would be measured, basically, and he probably would have cast her throughout his career had it been possible, was the stunningly beautiful, eminently talented, absolutely incomparable Ingrid Bergman. Right? She would star in Spellbound, Notorious, and Under Capricorn. Those are the Hitchcock films. I first came to know of her from Gaslight, which is even more pop culturally relevant because the term gaslight has literally entered zeitgeist as, hey, they're gaslighting you. They're telling you something's happening that didn't happen, or they're telling you something didn't happen that did happen. So gaslighting has definitely entered the cultural zeitgeist. Ingrid Bergman starred in that one. But for Hitchcock, she worked on Spellbound, Notorious, and Under Capricorn. Hitchcock adored Bergman, and she glowed under his tutelage. She would even give a speech at his Lifetime Achievement Award ceremony, I think it was in 1979. She herself was very ill with cancer at this time. She didn't have too much longer to live herself. Two worked astonishingly well together. They created suspenseful art of the sort that earned Academy Award nominations and awards. But Bergman's personal life led to the rift in the professional collaboration, as she had many lovers, which was not a problem. All right, remember, he liked his blonde Seedy. But the problem is that she was actively married when she ran off and divorced her first husband and married Roberto Rossellini. And when she ran off, she also left their daughter behind along with her first husband. And this was very dramatic. It was news-breaking information. It was too much bad behavior for even Hollywood of the 1940s to overlook. and resulted in Hitchcock searching for a new star to elevate to the heavens. Bergman would continue to be a powerhouse of an actress. She would work up until her death, August 29th, 1982. She was also born on August 29th, so she died on her 67th birthday. Now, the next actress that he found that he worked with and adored was one Grace Patricia Kelly. Most people are very familiar with that name. Based on what Leamer provides about Kelly, you kind of end up feeling sorry for her. It sounds weird, right? I mean, she grows up to be Princess Grace of Monaco. I mean, how do you end up feeling sorry for the literal fairy tale princess? So here's the brief rundown. The Kelly clan, from which she sprang, was highly athletic, and they placed a premium on sports and athletic ability. Grace was not athletic. She was the artistic one of the clan. She was not necessarily shy, but she definitely was more artistic. She was the youngest, and because she wasn't sporty, she wasn't anybody's favorite, even though she was the youngest, which traditionally the baby of the family is the spoiled one. She was not. She had a propensity for older men because she was looking for that fog. I mean, it's like a absolute like DSM manual 4 stereotype of the neglected child looking for her father figure. She liked older men because she was looking for that father figure. I don't know how much older Prince Rainier was, but it definitely, she was the black sheep of the family. And while she would bring several boyfriends home, the only one who would ever win approval was Prince Rainier III of Monaco. And the couple had, I think he said, only met like once or twice. They'd passed several letters back and forth, and Prince Rainier was motivated to marry and have kids. Because if he failed to produce an heir, the territory of Monaco would revert back to French control, and cease to be a monarchy at all. So that nice little tax haven found in the heart of Europe would vanish and fall under the control of France, which is certainly not a tax haven by any metric. So it may have been less of a love match and more politically expedient on Rainier's part, and familial expedience on Kelly's part, because these seems to be the one boyfriend she brought home that her father approved of. Isn't that sad? But before any of that happened, she would work with Hitchcock on Dial M for Murder, Rear Window, and To Catch a Thief, which are probably 3 of his most famous films of all. Hitchcock absolutely adored Kelly, and he was furious when she married Rainier and vanished into Monaco. And Leamer hints at a belief that this was not love but expedience, and that Kelly would have very much enjoyed acting in another Hitchcock film or two. But that, I mean, once you're crowned princess, there's not really any going back. I feel like certain other princesses should maybe be aware of that fact, that we all just want you to go and live your royal lifestyle. We don't care about you. Once Kelly was crowned princess, she would live the rest of her days in Monaco, giving birth to 3 children, before dying as a result of a car accident on September 14th, 1982. Now, I think I saw online that she may have had a stroke while driving on there. He writes it in the book very poetic. It makes it sound almost suicidal. I don't think that's true. I think it probably was a medical condition that resulted in the accident. But I wasn't there. Who knows? I mean, I was 5 at that time. Not even 5. I was 2 weeks short of 5 when she died. So, yeah, no. So the next one was Kim Novak. Now, Kim Novak was born Marilyn Pauline Novak. The name was changed due to the popularity of another blonde actress at the time, one Marilyn Monroe. They couldn't have 2 Marilyns running around, so they changed her name to Kim. Now, when Novak was discovered by talent scout Max Arno, he basically spotted her star quality just off of her looks, because she was that stunningly beautiful, and that is hard to argue with. I mean, look, stunningly beautiful woman, right? So just off of her looks, he pushed her for a studio contract for her, and the studio head, Harry Cohn, I believe, thought that she was nothing but a pretender. She was not. She was, however, grossly inexperienced, and the first of the Hitchcock ladies to basically be studio created. Everybody else had some acting skill beforehand, before Hitchcock started working with them. She really didn't. She was still talented. I'm not saying she wasn't. But the studio created the image of her that they wanted projected. When he needed a star for Vertigo, the studio basically pushed Novak at him and said, this is who you want. He took her in and he tried to work with her. And I think that, despite her absolute incredible beauty, he was ultimately unimpressed because he only worked with her for the one film, right? Now, arguably, it was one of his most impressive pieces, but part of his displeasure with Novak is that she would push back on what the character would wear or speak or walk or talk like. And Hitchcock knew what he wanted. And at this point in his career, he is the man. He's been nominated for multiple Academy Awards. Even if he doesn't win, everybody knows that he is the man to beat, the director of Hollywood, right? So he knew the characters he was creating and what they would be like. And when Novak told him that she would not wear a gray suit, Hitchcock listened to her politely. Like head director or head costume designer Edith Head was like, well, let's have you sit down with Hitch and see what he thinks. And he listened to her and then dressed her in the damn gray suit because this is what the story needed her to be wearing. And some actresses could provide feedback and he would listen. I'm thinking Ingrid Bergman and probably Grace Kelly were certainly two of them, but Novak was not. And despite her powerhouse double performance as both Madeline Elster and Judy Barton in Vertigo, Hitchcock, it would not work with her again. She was just too demanding. And part of that, to be fair, is not just her. It's that Hollywood is very new to her. At that time, she had an undiagnosed bipolar disorder, and she would become involved with Sammy Davis Jr., which is outrageously scandalous for 1950s America, where mixed race relations were not done. They just were not done. All right. The couple would split when Hollywood would send like a literal goon squad after Davis Jr., threatening him with violence if he didn't leave Novak alone. Novak is still alive. I believe she's 91 now. She's born in 33, so she's 91 now. She would ultimately leave Hollywood and that's when her diagnosis with bipolar disorder would happen. But she would find happiness. She married a veterinarian and still lives at the home they shared in Oregon. I'm not sure when he died, but I think it's in the book. She is one of two actresses that Leamer was able to interview for this book and was apparently very gracious with her time. The other actress was Eva Marie Saint, who would become the next leading lady, and she also only starred one film with Hitchcock. So North by Northwest is the spy thriller, and Eva Marie Saint is unique among Hitchcock ladies, not because she only starred in one film for him. Obviously, there were several of them who only starred in one film. It's because it seems like her only once with him was her choice, not his. Saint, prior to becoming a Hollywood actress, was happily married. She had 2 children when she was tapped to work with Hitch. And she was a consummate professional. She took direction well, she took guidance well, she got on with all the members of the cast. But her family and home life were more important to her than commercial success. So she only worked on 1 film per year. She traveled in the summer with her husband and children and had a successful 65-year marriage, which is ungodly unheard of in Hollywood, even Hollywood of 60, 70 years ago. She had 1 marriage to the same man, 65 years, lasted until he died in 2016. She still sees her kids, grandkids, great-grandkids. She is 100 years old, still alive. I Googled it. Her date of birth is July 4th, 1924, so she just passed 100. God love her. The next lady had unquestionably the shortest role and work time with Hitchcock, and it's so absolutely iconic she almost needs no introduction. Janet Leigh. I think the book says she's on film for like 37 minutes in a movie that's only 94 minutes long. That's 1/3 the length of the film. This was also a highly graphic depiction of murder, so masterfully done, creating such a mythos around it that spin-off series have been created around Norman Bates and the Bates Motel. They've done remakes of it, and it was shocking for another reason. Leigh, at this point was a star in her own right before working with Hitchcock. The other actresses certainly had their own star power, don't get me wrong, but Leigh agreed to work for 1/3 of her usual fee. She only earned like $25,000 for this film, which is great deal of money for the time that Psycho was released, 1960, right? But her usual fee was about $75,000. So she did the role just basically to work with Hitchcock. Hey, kudos, I get it, man. She was intrigued by the role. And again, Hitchcock had a good reputation. I mean, he had like a naughty boy's reputation, not like in a player kind of way, but he had a dirty sense of humor kind of way. She worked with him because I think she wanted to. And Lee's life is one that seems kind of fairy tale-ish. I mean, she was stunningly beautiful. She was married to Tony Curtis, but she had some dark secrets in her own past. She had had 2 prior marriages. I mean, her first one was when she was 14, which technically wasn't really a marriage because her parents got it annulled. She was only 14. She certainly was well below the age of consent. That, and then her second marriage, she was worried those scandals would ruin her name. So she and Tony Curtis, while they were certainly quite in love to begin with, and they had 2 children, probably most famous of which is Jamie Lee Curtis, right? The marriage would fall because they were ill-suited, I think. Curtis would fail because they were just a mismatch, or I'm sorry. It was not their marriage would fail because it was a mismatch, and not helped along at all by Curtis's lack of basic empathy. I mean, Lee's father would overdose on pills. He would be kind of a jerk about it. Lee would also attempt to end it all via overdose, although this attempt would fail, but it was a messy marriage. Lee remarried shortly after the couple divorced, and she died at home on October 3rd, 2004. Now, the final actress is Tippi Hedren. Now, Hedren was not an actress. All right? Be aware of this fact. She was a model. She, prior to working with Hitchcock, had never done anything but modeling. She was paid to stand there and be beautiful, and she did this exceedingly well. Her modeling career was coming to an end. She was 31, and she was cast by Hitchcock in The Birds because he saw her in a commercial, and she reminded him viscerally of Grace Kelly in looks. Not so much in acting ability. When he saw her, he had his team reach out to her and offer her a 7-year contract at a really knockdown. It was like $500 a week or something like that. Knockdown, okay, in today's currency, that would be, something like this. I'll Google it and tell you what it would be in today's currency for $500 a week in 1960s currency. It was a decent contract, but still, it was basically just to lock her in. And he spent a very frustrating 2 years trying to teach her how to act and to emote anything, which is virtually impossible because models get paid not to emote. They're paid to be blank slates, like literally, right? That's their job, is to stand there and be blank, because models are supposed to just wear the clothes so that the women watching the runway shows can imagine those clothes on themselves, excuse me. So he damn near tortured her on the set of The Birds, and later on the set of Marnie, which are the only 2 films that she made that reached any level of commercial success. And she later blamed Hitchcock for her failure as an actress. She is notably the only one who ever blamed him for her failure as an actress, claiming that he made inappropriate passes at her, or sexual harassment. It is worth noting here that only one other actress ever claimed he was inappropriate, and I don't remember which one, but it's in the book. I think even that actress said that she may have just misinterpreted what had happened, though. All of the actresses did comment on his dirty sense of humor, which was downright juvenile. I mean, he liked toilet jokes and fart humor. And also the same psychoanalyst that said Hitchcock had Asperger's also said that Hedren was, quote, a calculating narcissist. Now, does this mean that no such attempt happened? No. It is telling, though, that Tippi Hedren is famously the mother of Melanie Griffiths, who would run off to, Las Vegas and marry Don Johnson when Griffiths was 18. Don Johnson was, 8 years older than her? I don't know. You get the sense that the author has some opinions about Hedren that his own professionality kept him from really voicing. The closest he got to actual criticism was commenting on Melanie Griffith's early marriage and the wildlife refuge that she was raised on, where they tried to film like a decade-long movie that resulted in many, many accidents with large cats. Melanie Griffith almost lost her face from a lion attacking her. he had opinions that he was very professionally kept under wraps. It's also telling that Hedren waited to lobby her accusations about Hitchcock's inappropriate behavior until after he had died, and he was unable to defend himself. But she too was at his Lifetime Achievement Award. I don't know. That seems pretty scummy. You have to give people a chance to respond to an accusation. It's just shitty not to. But she is still alive. She did not get interviewed for this book. I'm assuming he reached out and she declined. But she does still run an animal sanctuary in California for large predator cats. Kind of surprised she wasn't in Tiger King, although to be fair, I did not watch all of Tiger King. It was just too white trash even for me. Hitchcock himself died April 29, 1980. Basically, after his Lifetime Achievement Award, he decided that he was not going to be able to make any more movies, and he just shut down his studio at Universal and stopped eating. He only drank water until ultimately he just faded and passed away. This book was fun. It was dark. I covered the biographical elements of the book in my review here, but it covers quite a bit of his psychology and how he came to make the art he made and the impact that art has had on cinema even into the 21st century here. I mean, he truly was a master storyteller. He understood on a visceral level how to make the camera tell a story. And if you have any interest in one of cinema's dark masters, I would highly recommend this one. It was very enjoyable. It was a very fast read. So Hitchcock's Blondes by Laurence Leamer is a good choice. I recommend it. And that's it for this week. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you guys next week. Bye.